So again, these questions just came in through registration. If anybody out there would like to add to these questions, by all means do so. But let's start off with, we talked about inflation. It's in the headlines, and it's also in our homes. So for students and families who are struggling, what are some resources that we can begin with when it comes to, first of all, acknowledging that financial challenges affect our bellies and our brains, right?
Right.
I think, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, and it's something I've been fortunate enough not to access, but I do believe UNLV does have a food bank.
We have a food pantry, yeah.
Yeah, and then something else that I would recommend, and it's kind of challenging, something that I've personally experienced is just saying that you are struggling financially to a mental health professional. I've seen them lower prices just for people. There's another clinic on campus, and I can't remember exactly what it's called. The one with the second year CFT students.
Center for Individual, Couple, and Family Counseling.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, I believe, open to everybody, and what they do is the payments on a sliding scale based on income.
Yeah.
But yeah, UNLV Food Bank, I think is something that would be very helpful to students who are struggling financially and don't want to pay $12 for an egg.
And that really breaks down another barrier, right? When we think about mental health, a lot of people go, well, I don't know if I can afford a therapist. And one of the things that UNLV practice that you also offer a similar program. It is supported by grants, so that is helpful there.
That's right. Both of the training clinics on campus operate on a sliding scale basis, and even the lowest scale on the slide, the lowest amount on the scale can be funded or subsidized by scholarship. We get donor dollars to help us set aside funds for those who can't even afford that lowest amount. One of the things I think is really important in developing strong mental and behavioral health systems of care is to incorporate all of the mental and behavioral health disciplines. It can be a little confusing, but there is psychology, there is medicine or psychiatry, there is counseling, there is social work, and each one of them brings a different piece to the puzzle. And one of those pieces is, for example, active case management through social work, connecting people to resources to help them, for example, with financial struggles. That's one example, or connecting them with low-cost services. There are many low-cost healthcare options in the community. There could be more, there's more to be done, but if we're working together as mental health providers, we're doing that much better service to the folks who come to us. And if we can know how to pick up the phone even and just call and make on behalf of one of our clients, to help connect them to those things, because it is true. Mental health is an interest. It's a really complex concept because so much goes into it. There are stressors that are sometimes outside of people's control. That there is something called inflation, right? And it's hard. Financial distress can hit any one of us, and those stresses and pressures, you going to therapy can help you, learn how to cope, but we also have to help connect people up to systems of support as well.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted problem for sure. If
right.
you cannot literally feed your basic needs,
right.
How do you get to the next step?
That's right.
Right. So,
UNLV has a support team that students can self-refer to, or staff, faculty, or students can refer another student. And that team has a care manager that can connect to on and off campus resources for financial assistance, food assistance, mental health services, kind of a breadth. We have DACA resources for DACA recipients on campus. So there's that a student may know they need help but not sure how to access it. They can refer themselves to that team and have a group of professional staff on campus who can maybe help them navigate a complex system, like the university has a lot of different moving parts, and get them the right resources.
Somebody asked a question as well about this transition phase, college, and then going into a career. And the question was, do you have advice for leaning into your strengths to find a career path? And inflation has kind of worked into that question too, right? How does someone find a line of work that they're passionate about, but can also sustain them financially? Is there, how do we bring mental health into that conversation?
Good question. Those are good questions.
I was just going to say that, work and kind of career, it's when I think of wellness, I think of the wellness wheel. Some of us might be familiar with the dimensions of the wellness wheel. And so kind of matching, having kind of wellness in terms of your job is tied into mental health, just like physical health is a dimension, spiritual health, there's a variety of dimensions. And I think, there are ways counseling can help someone sort that out. There are different career assessments that people can take, and also self-reflection on what are the skills that I have, abilities, interests, and what careers, and sometimes some online research would help, what careers have those pieces that I really like, or can I pick a career that's maybe something I like, and then have some of my leisure time might be things that I'm passionate about. Like, it doesn't all have to be in someone's career. It could be a blend of different things. So I think people solve that in kind of some different ways.
I think, too, there are resources like professors and other mentors or coworkers, and you can ask questions about, ideas for what to do next. One thing I want to point out, I think in this period of time in one's life in that transition college age, there's oftentimes, I think, a concern that you have to know, and you have to have the right direction. And if you don't know and have the exact right direction, that can be a very scary thing, because what if it's wrong? And being comfortable with flexibility and pick a direction, go in that direction, and then it's okay to change direction and make a new decision.
One of the students told me earlier today, when we were talking about mental health, she said she's learned having grace, being able to speak to herself with kindness was really helpful. Basically saying, okay, so maybe that didn't turn out how you expected it to be.
Right. Sometimes our internal chatter can really be not very nice, right? Yeah. We have this, I don't know about you all out there, but there are a lot of shoulds that happen in our minds. There's a famous psychologist, Albert Ellis, who says, "Stop shoulding all over yourself." You were gonna. I think you're gonna say something.
Yeah. No. So for me, on a personal level, with Avery. To me, I think it just goes to being more reflective and more investigative. Like, where is this stressor around transition coming from, right? So, again, with Avery's story, you're talking about someone that was Dean's List, top, graduate school score, very excited about his prospects. And then within a matter of weeks, now it's almost the reverse. So it's like, okay, so where is that coming from? And one of the stressors, and you heard it on the clip if you listen closely, that we aired at the beginning of the show, he had a slight stutter. And that factored into his perception about his career prospects. I mean, here's a kid who probably could have been Dr. Burton, Southern Nevada Health District Director, right? That's a leadership position. So in a person who is starting to feel onset of depression, do I see myself in that leadership position? Am I worthy of that? So I think we just need to go a little step further and start asking those questions, and this is instructive for the audience at home and the parents. Where is that coming from? And in the case of Avery, part of his stressor was, did he see himself as a leader because of his stutter?
The conflict there with identity is something that you talked about, Dr. Lentz.
And whatever he was thinking, right? There's a stutter, and what he was thinking about that stutter in terms of what it meant, or didn't mean.
And so just taking that even a step further, it's your peers understanding that as well. So you go out to eat and everyone orders their meal, and as Avery's starting to order his meal, someone wants to complete his order.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not thinking, hey, let him work through that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to complete his order because you're concerned about him not being able to get that order out because of that slight speech impediment. So that bothered him as well. Mm-hmm. I write about that in my book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just taking it a little bit step further and just asking those questions and listening with intention, and that intentionality behind it.
Conscientiousness.
Correct.
Right? Being aware. One of the questions asked was, there's still stigma out there around it's okay to not be okay. Some people still find that challenging, a challenging phrase. And this question dove into that maybe that is damaging to those who are struggling, because even being able to say that is hard. How could that stand in the way of one's mental well-being, and how do you get around that?
So something that we usually start our QPR lessons with is this, honestly, cringy little meme, which basically portrays physical illness in a way that people with mental illness hear. So I know there's one that's like, have you tried not having the flu? Go get some sunlight while the person's like bleeding out. Something that I hear all the time from my mom, and bless her heart, I love her, is when I'm feeling anxious or if I'm feeling depressed, go to the gym, go lift some weights. And sure, that does help, but it's not, it's a temporary solution. And sometimes even going to the gym, I'm just like, oh wow, all these guys are super buff, that makes me feel worse. So it is hard to really take a step back and figure out, okay, is it okay for me to say that I'm not okay? I think one of the biggest risk factors that people know about if someone is feeling suicidal or someone may have depression is that their grades slip. And something that I learned from teaching QPR at the medical school is something else we have to look after is if someone just is extremely focused in their studies, they are a perfectionist, or their parents are the ones pushing perfectionism on there. They might feel, if they're starting to feel depressed or overwhelmed, that I'm not worthy of these grades. I'm not worthy of becoming a doctor. I'm not worthy of this or that. I think it all kind of leads down, and it's going to be difficult for those who are struggling just to take a deep breath, and like you were saying at the very beginning, stop and smell the roses and exhale. And just try to figure out where are these internalized feelings coming from. Because it really is okay to not be okay, and even saying that and explaining my own struggles with different people, it's hard depending on the person. And I had to take a very long time to kind of control my self-dialogue and not be shitty to myself, like you were saying, Dr. Paul.
One of the resources that we've put up at the end of this broadcast is 988. Do you think the community knows enough about 988? That's the suicide crisis lifeline, the change made last year. There's been a lot of work to make sure people are aware of it, and that was the goal, to make it, instead of the 1-800 number, it became 988, should be accessible. Do you think it is?
I don't know. You know, it's a great question. I would like to think it is. I think I know in the mental health community, we're certainly spreading the word about that resource. There's been so much effort to spread the word about access to crisis lines. And just in general, I mean, there's a lot of national attention to this, and to even have a 988 system is, a huge step in the right direction. So I think we can never let our guard down. I think it's important to constantly be, sending these messages as much as we send messages about other aspects of our health, what to do in an emergency. A mental health crisis is just as valid of an emergency, and having a dedicated resource for that is uniform is amazing, and we just need to keep awareness up.
And we see that is expanding. We just reported earlier this week that now 988 is offering ASL, American Sign Language resources, through video phone. So making sure it is accessible to a community that cannot simply just make that phone call, right? So, and I really am so grateful that we are seeing these services expanding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in alignment. I think it is a good tool, but I'll offer a somewhat slightly alternative view based on feedback that I get from the community. It's accessible, it's free. I think those are two barriers that are worthy of pursuing, but I also think it just should be monitored, because if you talk to people in the Black community, as an example, they may not look at it the same way that we're discussing it, because as part of that service, it can be misused in some ways, where someone may do a wellness check based on information that's collected. So what could happen, and these are scenarios that some of the people that I work with have communicated to me, is that they don't want a police officer showing up at their door. Because now you could have a potential situation that escalates from a mental wellness check that evolves into something else, right? So that's a concern that I think people in our community have, and we need to properly manage these resources. And that's why we offer, other resources in addition to 988 on averyburtonfoundation.org.
Well, you make a really good point about gaps in the system, right? Mental health crisis teams look different from what is typically set up out into the community to respond to a crisis. And figuring out how to embed mental health providers in a response team so that it doesn't escalate into law enforcement being involved, which comes along with that comes a whole host of additional dynamics that can escalate a situation and make it appear to be punitive rather than corrective or healing or supportive.
And this is where cultural competency,
that's right, recognizing,
this is where cultural competency is important to emphasize as we talk through these therapeutics.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And as mental health gets more awareness, we can start to advocate for different policies and procedures around how to respond in the most effective manner to those who are struggling with a mental health crisis.
And this is why we're having this conversation, right? Anyone out there have a question for our panel?
So I just want to say, we don't know. Thank you. Okay, so first I just want to say to Reggie, I commend you for just being here and sharing your story. I just want to put my arms around you and hug you, because I have young boys here, and that story touched me, because we should never have to bury our children, and to answer your question, and it's going to end with a question also. We know each other. I'm Marlene Drake. Everton's Corporation was created because my brother was shot in the head. I was 16, he was 18. So that whole, you get that feeling in here, and that's all from your parasympathetic system. So to answer your question regarding your son, why did this happen? The same reason why it happened to someone like Twitch, that we were like, wait, why? He was so happy, he was doing great. The problem is we have a weak parasympathetic system. This is about the brain and the body and validating physiological sensations. So even though things look great for him, he had a lot of good stress and bad stress, and he didn't have homeostasis. So this is the problem. I got my education from back east. I came here, they don't have a crisis and trauma trained program. And so going to Liberty University, I realized, you know what? Therapy is not where I want to be. That's more maintenance. Crisis and trauma is what we come in and we say, we're not going to send you out on that baseball field without a helmet because you're not properly prepared. So if your son went to a therapist, and he was dealing with all these internal crises, what would happen is the only thing he had control over were his emotions. He shares that with a therapist. They don't know how to get that parasympathetic system going. What do you think happened? He doesn't know how to calm himself down, so he goes into ideation of suicide, and bam. And I'll share a quick story. I had a 17-year-old boy come to me. I think I'm gonna have a heart attack, blood pressure, and this young man actually helped him, but blood pressure is 167/97. He did his biofeedback. He realized, oh my God, my parasympathetic system is weak. My heart rate, my pulse, my coherence is off. He saw that. He was aware. He could visually be aware and see this on a screen. He says, okay, I need to try something else. That's when you come in and you say, let's try this coping skill. We don't do regular grounding. We don't go through the therapy skills. We put you on a table. Let's do some parasympathetic system to reduce your physiological arousals with meditation. Do you know after meditation, his blood pressure went to 108/80. So what I'm trying to say is I have been stressing this to everyone. Most of you on the board knows me. And this works. I have statistics from students. I am tired. When I heard your story, I wish I was there because this was parasympathetic system. There's a difference between mental health and mental illness. So yes, they are approached differently. I do CISD, critical incident stress debriefing. And when a young person comes to me, I never give them feedback, because then what happens when you give someone feedback and they're not prepared to reach equilibrium because they're at disequilibrium. So now your sympathetic system is in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. But guess what? It's so overused that your parasympathetic system, what does it do? It's not prepared to help them relax. So with that, for the panel, if you have someone that comes in and their breathing is irregular, I don't know if you check heart rate at our clinic at CSN, we do that. But if they come into you and you see they are at disequilibrium, do you agree that giving them feedback and asking them to share and give away the one thing they have control over, which are their emotions, that give it to you, do you think that that is the wisest thing to do, which can increase ideation of suicide when they don't know how to calm themselves down?
So, first of all, let me say thank you. I appreciate your kind words, and that really means a lot to me. And we will talk, and we will get that hug afterwards. The sad part about what you're sharing is that we never got that far with Avery. And part of the reason why we're doing this work, I think, is to educate families so that they know what to look for. That language and that vocabulary that you're describing, I think that's an important part of this process. We need to increase the understanding and the knowledge base for a lot of families so that they can understand what is happening inside their home, that ecosystem that we talked about. I'll let the other panelists, who are probably more qualified to speak to some of the substance of your question, but I think you make some really good points, and I would love to have more information about your resources and the things that you do so that we can put those up on our website.
Could you repeat your question again? You said something about feedback, and I wasn't sure if you were talking about biofeedback or you were talking about giving someone verbal feedback. Could you clarify your question?
The issue is you have to understand biofeedback to understand where that person is. You can't look at someone and physically know what their inside is doing, right? And so what I'm saying is it good to give feedback to someone that is in a state of crisis or is maybe has, you know, some issues going on, challenges at home, challenges academically? Do you think until you know what's going on and if they know how to communicate and verbalize those emotions accurately, should you give somebody feedback?
Are you talking about biofeedback?
No,
Oh,
I'm
you're
just
talking
saying
about-
feedback as a therapist, because if you read peer-reviewed journals, that is increasing a lot of the suicide problems that we have right now. It's because they're getting this information from a therapist and they didn't know how to control and get themselves back to equilibrium. So before you dive in,
Yeah,
you
I
have to make sure that they know a coping skill that works. How can you
Right,
identify?
okay, right. I hear what you're saying now, yes. So when we're working with trauma in our clinic, we don't dive right in, right? We work first at making sure that the person has skills to regulate before you get to that.
How do you identify that? By evidence-based data, how do you identify that?
How do I identify what?
How do you identify
Their dysregulation?
Right, how do you identify that those skills, those coping skills are working? So how can you tell that parasympathetic system with numbers, evidence-based data, support, science? For example, coherence is 0 to 100. If someone comes into you with a 13% out of 100, you need to have this? You keep giving it to me. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If they come into you and their coherence is from 0 to 100 and they're at 13% and they go in, I've had students come to me from UNLV and they're in tears and they went to your CAPS. So once we put them on bio, they see they were at 29%. That's ideation of suicide. They don't know how to regulate themselves. So here we support them with real true coping skills where they test themselves and they write it in a book and they run the data and they say, oh, this is working. Then I say, now you're ready for a therapist. Go do your talk therapy. That's your maintenance. That's what I'm saying. If you know that now and you're aware of it, would you be more supportive and saying to that person, you know what? I really want to help you. Let's try to make sure you're inside. You don't have that cortisol rushing through your vital organs so you're not in survival mode. We are now in survival mode too much. We're not back in caveman days when you got killed right away or you ran away, right? So now, how can we help those students by identifying with a number to see what is their heart rate? Are we checking their heart rate? Are we checking their pulse? That's truly how you can identify, are they reaching? Because we have more and more students. This young man spoke about young people have a lot of stress and we don't realize that.
Yes.
And that's what made me do the study I'm doing right now.
I think it's about being able to find that calm within, right? How do we take those steps?
Right.
And I'd love to hear from all of you. What are your personal coping skills?
Oh.
What do you personally do when you need to bring it back?
If you
to
want to find me, I'll be at
equanimity?
Lifetime in Green Valley.
Okay, so the workout, the gym is what works
Yeah.
for you.
So, yeah.
Okay, so the gym-
That's my place.
So that's, how about Bryce? You said, maybe not always the gym.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes other side of town, Lifetime.
I won't embarrass you, Bryce.
That's fine. I mean, you obviously look, you can bench at least twice that I can. I'm here with my 2 marshmallows from SpongeBob. So in my personal experience, I wish I had that. What I struggle with is severe anxiety, which has led to a lot of self-harm. Pretty sure a lot of my, again, I'm an open book when it comes to my struggles. So this is YouTube, so I guess they could just mute me. When I was having a severe anxiety attack, I would hit myself in the head, or I would do anything to try to literally bang the anxiety out of my head, and that obviously I was not in equilibrium. My heart rate was out of control, and even now when I feel anxious, the first thing I do is check my heart rate. And I was never hooked up to any machines, and I'm not an expert, so I can't say, oh, you know, we should do this. I can only give my experience, but it was really hard for me to find coping mechanisms that would actually calm myself down. What I do now, and this took 2-3 years just for this simple thing, was literally like just putting my life on pause. Like I could be walking down the street and I'll just stop because I'm feeling anxious and take a deep breath and kind of see myself in like third person and just be like, okay, I'm okay. Calming down my self-dialogue. But I definitely do think taking a look at the biological and making sure that our raging hormones, our survival instincts can be calmed down. And I think that's definitely where a lot of experimental therapy that I've heard about and I'm definitely interested in can come in. And I think it's very important to take a look at the biological before we're able to give feedback. Because I know when I'm in a crisis and someone gives me feedback, like even like telling me what I do personally, like take a deep breath, pause for a moment, dude, I get pissed off. I'm like, why are you telling me this? I'm freaking out right now. Of course I know that. So definitely being able to have the skills to identify what's going on in my body will help me identify what's going on in my head. So
Zooming out. Yeah.
If I can interject for a second. And I apologize, Bryce. I'm his father.
Yeah.
And
Here we go. All right.
first of all, I'm very proud of him here today. But I lived through what Bryce just described. I'm a professional. I'm a bankruptcy attorney and a bankruptcy trustee out here in Las Vegas. I deal with the UNLV Law School a lot. And I hear about the finances that I see a lot of things in my practice pertaining to that. But just for purposes of this discussion that Bryce just described, as a parent, the question is, where do we go? I saw it. What do I do as a parent? I saw, we're on YouTube, Bryce, a hole in a wall. What do I do? We can talk, but where do I turn? And the problem that we have in this community, at least a few years ago, is when I made those phone calls, no one could direct me to where I should go or what I should do. And my wife and I, we had that issue. What do we do with that particular situation? I mean, eventually we got through most of it. But at that particular time, that particular moment, what do you do? And we don't know what to do. There's no book that's out there. But one of the things I think UNLV could do to help their students, and maybe you do this and I don't know, is the program that Bryce is currently involved in, but it should be almost mandatory for students to actually attend those types of things. Have education, let it be in high school or college, their first year, their first day, to know about those types of programs, know what to look for when they see a friend and have that communication. I mean, I'm a very big advocate of financial education for elementary students. So the question starts beginning after hearing the panel today, when do you start having that discussion? How old should those kids be? When you start talking about, should we have a communication with our friend? And when do you actually say something to an adult, a parent, a teacher, that someone's actually going through some type of particular issue or particular concern? But honestly, I have to say here, sitting here today, and this is the first time I've seen Bryce actually speak, I am so impressed of what he's done here today and how he's grown up and been such a great young man. So I'm very proud of you. So sorry to interject there, but I thought that was an appropriate time because you actually had a parent living through, and I saw it, and what trying to do at the next step, and I didn't know what to do. I made phone calls to everyone I knew. There was one individual, I guess I should interject, that did help. I can't recall his name, but as a bankruptcy attorney, we actually had, unfortunately, a death in the bankruptcy bench a few years ago inside the courthouse, and which affected a lot of bankruptcy attorneys because we all knew that individual judge who was a friend of mine prior to getting onto the bench. And so I turned to that person who actually gave a lecture, and it was that person who assisted me going down the road and trying to find some additional resources to try to help. But again, as a parent, we didn't know where to turn. And if I didn't know where to turn, I don't know how anyone else who sees that situation really knows where to turn.
Well, thank you for that, and well done, Bryce. I mean, I think getting your dad out here and to have that exchange kind of warms my heart. And I'm not sure, forgive me, I wasn't paying attention when you walked in, but you know, there is a book. It's called This Is Depression. I wrote the book. And it's based on my son, that logo, Avery Burton, who was a graduate of UNLV, this school. I didn't get that opportunity to get a lot of those questions answered. That's why he's not here. So I'm grateful that Bryce is here and you guys are able to work through this together. But that's why I'm up here, to help parents better understand through my loss, through my pain, what I went through, what our family went through, to better understand. What are the signs to look for? How can we have those conversations? What is mental health first aid? What is the vocabulary? The ma'am, the audience member that spoke earlier, she talked about some things that really hit close to home. Grief, you know, losing a loved one, losing someone that's 18 years old, 22 years old. We're not supposed to be burying our kids. I mean, that's something that's hard to wrap your mind around to begin with. So again, I'm grateful and I'm hopeful that these conversations will yield more conversations. I mean, I'd love to figure out, how do we do mental health first aid with the UNLV basketball team, the football team?
Well,
You know, how do we establish an Avery Burton Foundation on this campus in his name and work together to endow social work scholarships? We're already doing scholarships. So let's take this great conversation and let's move it forward so that we can do better.
To answer that question, where does a family turn to first?
Well, I'd like to answer that question. And I'd also like to reflect a little bit on the broader issues at hand. We can have debates about specific interventions and which ones are evidence-based and so forth. But why you didn't have somebody to call and who was either answering the phone, returning your phone call, or knowing where to send you is because we have under-resourced and under-prioritized mental and behavioral health, workforce development, services. You know, insurance reimbursement is not at parity or at par with insurance reimbursement for medical health conditions. And so it is very difficult to build a workforce when it's difficult for them to keep the lights on in their own practice. And so there is important work to be done at a policy level in order to make it a career that people want to pursue, make it services that are reimbursable so that there's plenty of space available when you do make that phone call to get your kiddo in the next day, as opposed to 3 to 6 months out, which is what we have right now in this community. We need more mental health providers. We need qualified mental health providers that get excellent training in evidence-based practices, and we need a system that's willing to pay for it. Part of the problem with mental health is, in many ways, yes, there are lots and lots of skills that can be infused. And when you ask how early, we can start talking about how to take care of ourselves. You know, we teach our kids how to brush our teeth, right? We could start at age-appropriate levels giving them skills for emotional regulation and also how to parent around, you know, emotional and behavioral issues. There are things to be done. But beyond that, there are, I knew this would happen. I lose my train of thought. I get going, and then I get going. Where did I
I think
leave
what
off?
you're saying is that
Yeah.
we have much to work toward. You
There's
said
much-
earlier
right.
that we rank at the bottom when it comes to
Right.
mental health
Right.
resources. And what we see in this space is that
Right.
we are trying. We have much work to do, but
Right.
with the collaboration, with the support of the community, the hope tonight is that we'll get there. We have time
That's
for
right.
one more question. And
Thank
you've
you.
been standing there
Thank you
patiently
so
with the
much. But
microphone.
I'm going to tie it in all together. My name is Dr. Jerry Hu. I'm a triple board certified sleep apnea dentist. I'm a father of 3 boys. My oldest, actually like Avery there, he has a tic and he has a stutter. And so I can relate. And thank you, Reggie, for your story. Very, very thoughtful. And I love cultural competency. That part was very beautiful. You can imagine in an Asian family, the stresses that come with school, scholastics are all important. So my first question actually is related to your father's question in terms of, I know that there are a lot of universities, particularly a lot of the Ivy League universities, that use sky breathing and meditation. Actually, I've seen statistically and evidence-based that there is really far improvement. And I was wondering in the QPR system if you've looked into or dabbled into some of the meditation, sky breathing, Guru Shri Shri, and those things are combined with mindfulness, being at the moment. You can't change the past, and you can't always have worries about the future, but really being at the moment, if there's any type of looking into or research into that.
Yeah, so like I said before, what I teach is very, very basic. So I'm not even entirely sure what sky breathing is. Could you explain it?
Well, yeah, it's really meditation, but there's different forms of it. It gives your energy, it reduces anxiety, but there's also sort of levels that you're, a little bit of enlightenment and kind of being really mindful at the moment, focusing on your breath and not letting things in. I think you can agree that that has been evidence-based to show not just lowered blood pressure and oversympathetic tone, right? And being a sleep apnea dentist, the elephant in the room for me was that we know now there's plenty of literature to support and say all the comorbidities with untreated airway issues, sleep apnea, upper airway resistance syndrome. Imagine even a child, right, with swollen tonsils and adenoids, if they're not getting their proper sleep or if they're being choked 200 times a night, you think they're going to be very functional at school? No, and oftentimes they're misdiagnosed, right? They have ADHD, and what happens with that? It's Adderall, it's Ritalin, and to me as a child, that was speed. You're giving speed to children, right, to get them through. So a lot of times, even with seniors, Alzheimer's, dementia, Stanford Sleep Medical have a lot of research on the beta amyloid and tau proteins that build up if you don't cycle through N3 delta wave sleep, et cetera, et cetera. But it's very important, too, that I think, like you've all said, with the multifaceted interdisciplinary approach is really well needed.
Yeah.
And just because we're 51 and the resources, it doesn't mean we can't change that.
No.
So I'm so happy that we're here and we can start something. I like to flip it. Sure, you can look at it as a negative aspect, but hey, it's a bigger goal. And if we work together and collaborate, and I also teach at Medical University of South Carolina. So if anytime UNLV wants me to teach, I know the Nevada Heart and Vascular, they want me to, I do it for free. I'm more than happy to share sleep apnea and how it's correlated with mental health, insomnia, depression, all of that.
The importance of sleep has never been more recognized in terms of mental, cognitive, mental, behavioral health. Absolutely, hands down, underscore, I agree. Right, and where there's crisis, there's plenty of opportunity.
Yes. Sleep is 1/3 of our lives, so if we don't get quality sleep, it affects everything, our
Yeah.
energy and all of that.
Yeah.
So our ability to cope with anxiety and stress. So,
So
thank you.
it comes back to, thank you so much for that. It comes back to coping mechanisms, right? And again, being mindful of what your body needs, your mind needs, and how it is a partnership, symbiotic.
Right.
I think that wraps up this special. We have the honor of great conversations here tonight. Again, the call to action is to care about ourselves and each other. And I thank all of you. I care for all of you for being here, taking time out of your Wednesday night to join us here in this space.